Joining us now, though, the Executive Associate Commissioner for the Big 12 Conference, former standout at Nebraska. In fact, he was a Butkus Award finalist, has a degree from Nebraska, a master's from Michigan State, and like I said, oversees football primarily for the Big 12 Conference. Ed Stewart, see him on the sidelines at a lot of games during the year. And Ed, I certainly hope you and your family, everybody with the Big 12 Conference office, that everybody's doing okay.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me. We are doing well. Hope you and yours are doing well as well. You know, it's kind of crazy. We're finishing week 6 now of our stay at home order and work from home since the men's basketball tournament was canceled.
Yeah, I've got a anxious junior college head coach, like any coaches. Are the coaches right now, just to cut to this, are they the ones that you hear the most from and are maybe the most anxious about everything that's going on?
No, I think there's a level of anxiety and anxiousness throughout college athletics. Frankly, you know, college football is so important nationally and like so many other sports, but it really is kind of the lifeblood, if you will, especially for those who are in it directly. And I know our coaches and our players and myself, you know, we're all anxious and hopeful that we get that green light at some point in time to get back to business and do what we all love to do.
The reason I put in the request with Bob Berta this morning, I was thinking how I wanted to handle the news from last night. We did get a little bit of normalcy last night with the National Football League draft. It wasn't done in the normal way, but it was the draft, and you could recognize it was the draft. And I know that the Big 12 is it hadn't lately. The drafts haven't always been great for the public relations of football in the Big 12. But last night with 5 first-round picks, and I realized what the SEC did, 15, and it was crazy. But it was the Big 12 and the Big 10 right behind the SEC with 5 first-round picks, and I thought it was a good night for the Big 12 conference because obviously a lot of people put stock in ranking how good your football is by how many players you're sending to that next level, and that was a good number, and those were some good players that went last night.
Well, I tell you what, Robert. First and foremost, congratulations to the 5 young men that had their name called on day one. I know that's a dream come true for them and a goal that they've probably been working a lifetime to achieve. And, you know, how about that? And 3 of those players were on the defensive side of the ball. So, you know, a lot of this stuff is cyclical. We've said for a long time that we believe we've got outstanding coaches in our league. We feel like we've got great players in our league. The depth from top to bottom is, we think, second to none. And so I think it was a good sign, more importantly, for the young men in their programs that were selected last night. If that bodes well for what our league as a whole, that's great too.
Well, and when you look at it, the one that I was, I mean, obviously we knew C.D. Lamb was going to go and that Murray was going to go. Um, the two from TCU with Rager, guy. I mean, I've seen him make some incredible plays. Jeff Gladney, a good corner, but I'll tell you the one that I was kind of the most excited about was Jordan Brooks because he's a great story. The way he's emerged, had kind of a roller coaster ride, but once he got settled in at Tech, he has been fantastic. And last year, one of his best games I saw in person because he was textbook. He was a turnover causing machine against a young quarterback and took advantage of that in their win over Oklahoma State. And Jordan Brooks is, I think, a great story.
Yeah, that is a great story. You know, it's funny. I think it was probably 2 years ago. I was at a Tech game or somewhere with Kirby Hocutt, the athletic director at Tech, and of course, former linebacker at Kansas State, and he and I competed against one another, both former linebackers, and we were talking about linebackers. He was saying, man, we've got this kid, Jordan Brooks. He can really be special. You gotta check him out. And so I remember starting to pay a little bit more closer attention to him, and he is a really good player, and it's great to see him continue to develop during his time at Texas Tech, and now to get his name called in the first round, and be heading to a great program, going out to the Seattle Seahawks and championship caliber team. So that's got to be special for him, and I know it's huge for Texas Tech. And again, I think it's just a tremendous representation of the Big 12 Conference overall. And there's a lot of good names still left on the board that we expect to hear called today, and I guess tomorrow. The draft is what now, 3-day affair now?
Yeah, it's 3-day affair. And Ross Blacklock from TCU is another one that I kind of anticipate going pretty soon. And there's several others. Oklahoma State really just has one candidate with AJ Green at corner. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to get into a couple of things, and let's just go to that because we talked about it. Next year, Oklahoma State. I know there's going to be a lot of excitement, I think, around here about draft time because even though he'll have another year of eligibility, I think most of us expect Chuba Hubbard will probably put his name in the draft next year. He was considering that this year. Tylan Wallace at receiver. Tevin Jenkins is an offensive tackle that the Pro Football Focus people, I really didn't pick up on it, even though I'm watching it every week. His man never touched the quarterback all season long, and he's another one of those really big tackles, and we saw a bunch of them go in the draft last night. So next year, I'm planning I may need to be up in Cleveland if it's a normal draft because Oklahoma State's name may get called a few times next year in the first round.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I haven't seen many of the early rankings and who's expected to fare well in the league, but I would imagine that Oklahoma State will be right up there near the top. You just spoke to several players that you have coming back, so your offense should really be scary next year with the personnel that you have returning. So it should be hopefully a fun time for everybody to be able to enjoy some college football and get back to some sense of normalcy.
Couple of things with Ed Stewart, who is the executive associate commissioner of the Big 12, that primary responsibility is football. Just this last week, we had Mike DeFee and Cooper Castleberry on the program, both retiring from Big 12 officiating as referees, white hats, and I know Mike's going to go help train referees at the NFL level. Cooper's going to become an evaluator or observer for the Big 12, but also heard Eddie Shelton retiring, and Reggie Smith, one of my buds down on the field, is going to another conference. So we're going to see, I guess, a lot of turnover in the officiating ranks for next year.
Yeah, you really hate to see some of these guys transition after they've been with you for so long. But the one thing that I often remind people, the officiating is a real grind for some of those guys, and the amount of work that they put into it, and the level of intensity that it carries, and how significant their decisions are in the outcomes of ball games. But Cooper and Mike were outstanding officials for us. Happy for Cooper that he had such a long tenured career with us, but you hate to lose that expertise. But we've got some really good young guys in the program. We've got some guys that have been with us for a while. I think we're well positioned to absorb this transition based on our CFO West concept, where we kind of have a partnership with 3 leagues where we can have consistent training across the board and have an opportunity to get people into our program at the Southland level, and they advance their way up to the Big 12. So it's definitely a loss to lose someone at the status of Cooper and Mike DeFee and Reggie, but it certainly presents a tremendous opportunity for some other guys who are ready to go to get out there and showcase what they can do.
Yeah, and then the last thing, obviously, and we just had Doc Ivan on, Dr. Valjean Ivan, the team doctor at Oklahoma State, and no one has a crystal ball with this, but um, what are you involved in right now as far as working potentially ahead, and is there anything you can tell us that you see in the future that you feel pretty good about, or is it all as tenuous as we hear from most of the people in college athletics?
Yeah, there's just such uncertainty. I think we are working hard behind the scenes with our athletic directors and our head coaches, and then also our peers from the other FBS conferences, and in particular the other Autonomy 5 conferences, just to try to understand and see what consensus we may be able to develop and what a return to play model will look like once we have the opportunity, hopefully sooner rather than later, to get our student athletes back on campuses. We always have to be mindful of any and every scenario that we may be faced with. So we're looking at a variety of models that could potentially impact the season, from the most optimistic that we can start on time with our games September 3rd and September 5th and play our way through uninterrupted, to potentially what it may look like if we had to delay the start of the season for a couple of weeks, or to it being as extreme as if for some reason we were not able to play in the fall and we had to consider some alternative of possibly a spring season, and there's variations in between. It's just a complete unknown right now, and I think this COVID-19 virus will end up ultimately telling us all what we can and cannot do.
Well, Ed, certainly appreciate you coming on with us. A good night last night, and like you said, there's a lot of good players in the Big 12 that are still on those boards that NFL teams are considering. We'll start looking at that tonight with the second and third rounds tonight. But again, it was good to see five young men call from the Big 12 last night.
That was great. And Robert, thanks for having me on. And you and your family stay well, and hopefully everyone in and around Stillwater area stay safe as well. Take care.
You and everybody else at the Big 12, tell Bob thanks, and again, say hello to the commissioner, and we appreciate it.
All right, bud. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, Ed Stewart, again, Executive Associate Commissioner for the Big 12 Conference.